I'm waiting on your cue, okay, Hari?
Yes, sir. We are live now. We can get started.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank our audience. Good morning. First, I'd like to thank our audience for joining this discussion around Microsoft Power App Platform and its use cases. I'm Khalil Sheikh, and with me is James Sarah. Today, we'll be talking about what is this market all about around global low-code, no-code platforms, and how Microsoft is playing in this space. Let's get started. A little bit of work that we have done here. This market is currently about $13.2 billion in 2020, and we are expecting to be around 45, 46 billion by 2025. So there's a lot of compound annual growth, around 28% in the next 2-3 years. So this is a lot of interest and adoption in the marketplace. So without further ado, I'll start my question with James. So James, what is this global low-code, no-code development platform is all about, and what is the adoption rate as you see it?
Sure, it's an interesting topic, and when I was at Microsoft, I had a lot of engagement with customers who are looking to build a product, whether it's internal or a commercial product in there. And what I found is people want shortcuts. They want the easiest way to build solutions on that. And what does Microsoft provide, or other third-party products provide, that could make my development easier, to not take months to go and build a solution? And I found the tools available for low-code and no-code, which we'll talk about, are in many cases excellent for those internal projects that they're building. You wouldn't generally use these for commercial applications that you're building and selling, but if you have requirements internally in your company, which every company has, to build a solution that is only going to expose internally, these are great options for you. And I wouldn't say anything is no code. There is always some coding involved. Now, it could be just setting properties, and it could be, okay, sometimes you do have to go to get additional features and write something in say Python or Scala. But in most cases, these tools are very powerful in and themselves, and you can get most, if not everything, done with these tools. If you need to go into the commercial area, we're building a product, or you need extreme amount of functionality, and you go into the .NET and the full stack, that's a very different thing. But the focus today is on those low code and no code. And also the big thing, and I see a lot of adoption, is because you don't have to be a programmer to use most of these tools. You can be a power user or a business user, and these tools, some of them are just drag and drop, and it makes it very easy to build solutions. And I'm coming from the developer world back in the 80s. I won't go into my COBOL days, but I've seen a big change over the years with the ease of use. And the newer tools here are just a whole new generation of ease of use when you're looking to build a solution.
Okay, thanks, James. And how do you define the Power App platform? There are so many components of it, right? So when we are talking about Power Apps versus Power Platform, tell us a little bit about Power Platform, and how does Power Apps blend into various different tools and applications that is available through Microsoft platform?
Yeah, the Power Platform, and it's a little confusing because there's name changes. Microsoft's real good at renaming things. And so over the past few years, some of the products have changed. But think of the Power Platform as an umbrella name. Underneath this umbrella is a handful of products. One of them is Power BI. So and a lot of these I would say all these products are very different, but they work together a lot. And that's why they're all in this one umbrella. So you have the Power BI, that reporting tool or self-service ETL tool. Power BI has really grown, but at its core, it's for publishing dashboards and reports is the main focus. Then you have Power Apps, which is the ability to use no code, low code to build internal solutions and custom apps that are going to solve business challenges. You can think of it as, I've heard people call it the next generation of Microsoft Access, which I think is pretty accurate. It could be, I need a screen and I need to have data entry and I need to enter all that and store it in a database. And that's the main function of Power Apps. And we'll get into more of how easy Power Apps makes things, but think of it as I'm creating some forms that people are going to fill out and take action on. There's another product in there called Power Automate, which used to call Microsoft Flow, which works hand in hand with the Power Apps, and it's building workflows. So I can have a Power App, maybe I'm designing this application internally that is going to allow people in the org to order laptops. And instead of the old ways of sending out forms and emails and taking people's requests that way, you can quickly create a Power App that lists all the models that are available for laptops and allows you to select one and put all your information in, all within Power Apps. Once you take that screen and you hit save, Power Automate can take over and take all information and create this workflow where it goes for approval if it's over a certain price to your manager who approves it, who then it goes to purchasing, who places the order and automates emails. And so this part of the Power Automate process in there, and that's extremely powerful with Power Automate, and you can use that on your own. I always like to use an example. I can have Power Automate look at my Outlook mailbox, and when Satya sends me an email from Microsoft, he's the CEO, I'm going to automatically reply to it with my favorite restaurants because he's probably sending an email to go to lunch. And I'm going to tweet
Porque eres el que más ha venido aquí a reírse, a ir de respetuoso, cuando eres un puto ignorante de mierda y te dedicas a hablar de mi trabajo.
That I am going to have lunch with Satya, and all that could be handled through Power Automate. And then lastly, there's another component called Power Virtual Agents. That is the ability to build chatbots and have those conversations with customers or employees. And there's no coding for that one, very little coding for that one too. So that is kind of a very separate thing. It can integrate with Power Automate a bit, but all of those four products fit underneath the Power Platform. And I think the challenge is there's very different skill sets for those four products. So you don't generally say, hey, somebody's gonna need to
Se van a la recalcada con la repúsima madre que lo recontra
You're usually going to focus in on one of those applications. So hopefully you heard that.
Yes. I think we have some naughty person trying to get into the meeting and pretending to be somebody. Harry, can you mute everybody? Like, you know, in the Zoom setting, you can set up everybody who's joining. They cannot, their audio should be mute.
Yeah.
Yeah, please. Thank you. So, James, what about Microsoft applications? How do you blend Power Apps into Dynamics, Office 365? Because that's where the power of Power App is, right? That you can build on top of these already existing platforms, applications, CRM, ERP, SharePoint. So what do you see in your experience, that how do you blend these applications, and what kind of organizations have you seen that are started to adopt it to extend their current Microsoft stack?
Yeah, one of the great things about Power Apps and also Microsoft Flow is they have all these connectors. Power Apps has over 300 connectors to everything you can possibly think out. I mentioned Outlook, but it can connect to Gmail or Twitter or Facebook or Salesforce. And so right out of the box, I can say, I'm going to use Power Apps and I need to pull in data from any of these sources. Or I'm going to use Microsoft Flow and I need to pull data from Power Apps and send out that tweet by connecting to it. And it's truly drag and drop. So you just go in there and say, I need a connector, and it asks you for properties of like your username and password to connect to those sources on there, and boom, right away, you have this custom connector. There's even parts of that where you can think of having pre-built platform pieces in there where you can add that and you can say, I need to do this, and it automatically creates the flow for you to go and pull that data and maybe store it or tweet out on that. So that was when I first played with Power Apps a few years back, and with Power Automate, that was the one thing that surprised me, was how quickly and easily it was to connect to all these these sources and integrate that data or push data to those connectors on there. So that opens up a whole different world of ease of use on there. And just think of it as the challenge before this came along was to connect a lot of these things. Usually there was some custom code you'd have to find, or you have to buy some third-party product that was specific to each of these connections. Now they're all built in there for pretty much everything. And also, they're underneath the covers with the Power Platform, it's specifically Power Apps, is I can use the Microsoft Dataverse, which was previously called the Common Data Service. And think of that as a abstraction layer over a common data model to store all your data. So I can say, I'm collecting data, maybe it's healthcare data, and I want to save it. And instead of doing all the work to write the code, well, first you got to go to the database, you got to create the database and create the model, and then write the code to store all that data in there. If you hook it into Dataverse, all that is built in, and that makes it so much easier to take that data entry and put it into a database on there because of Dataverse, which then can be accessed through a lot of different products in there. So if you want to take that data, say using your data factory, want Power BI and display it, you can do all that very easily. And so that, well, that's not officially part of the Power Platform. Some people can say it is officially. It's a big piece of that that's available for you to use to make things even easier. And also within Power Apps is a thing called Canvas apps, and another type of solution to build in there is using this model-driven apps in there. And I won't go into the difference between the two, but there are options if you use Canvas apps and it's not enough functionality in there, you could also use these model-driven apps on there. So they've kind of separated it out depending on the skill set of the person building it and their needs. And I always saw Power Apps when I first played with it. It reminded me of many years ago when Visual Basic first came out. And before that, you were doing a lot of coding in a notebook and that was just the way you did things. And then Visual Basic came out that was very visual, so I can click and drag things. And you still had to do some decent amount of code behind it, but it was a very different way that made it very easier to code. And I view as Power Apps as, I had the same feeling that, wow, it's become so much easier to now code compared to .NET or Visual Studio or any of those things. Power Apps took it to a whole other level because of all those connectors that made it so easy. And a lot of stuff is pre-built. You can imagine there's so many people that want to take, say, Twitter feeds and put it into a database. Well, all that's already built out for you, just kind of clicking and dragging and customizing a few things here and there. And boom, you have an app. And one of the first things I did a few years ago too was they had a Power Apps in a day. And in just a handful of hours, you create and build this whole solution that works and is powerful. And you sit back and almost awe that, wow, I completed this in just 5 or 6 hours. And add to it that anything you build in Power Apps can be used on a mobile phone, and it automatically changes the appearance on there. So you don't have to worry about coding for 2 different types of environment. Power Apps changes based on the display model. And so if you need to use anything on a phone, then you just create it once and it can be used on both. So that opens up a whole other world too, because everybody's using their phone nowadays. So if I need to enter data and I want to pull up Power Apps, I can do it on the phone. Or if I need to execute something in Power Automate, I can do that all on my phone too with almost no changes.
Thank you, James. In our experience, we are seeing some small, mid-sized organizations started to adopt Power App platform a little bit more so in some of the industries like BFSI and healthcare. What has been your experience? Who are the early adopters, and what are the size of engagements that is coming across? What is the normal engagement cycle, and how easy or difficult it is for organizations to adopt it?
Yeah, the thing I like about this Power Platform and Power Apps is I've seen adoption across all types of businesses. It could be a one-man shop, it could be a woman shop, it could be a huge company in there, because it's pretty inexpensive if you look at the cost model in there, and because it's easy to use and you don't need to build a lot of support around it. This is all, I can go on a web browser and build out this solution in here. I don't have to go and set up this infrastructure. I don't have to hire all these people to help me understand the product and build out the solutions on there. I've seen one-man companies that have said, look, I'm struggling with just keeping track of all my email. I wish I could have a product or solution that I can quickly and easily filter. And so if you take what Outlook could do with the filters and then you expand on that with Power Automate in there, it can do so much by looking at your Outlook email and then flagging or forwarding your emails or putting them all in the folder. And it's just a click and drag to do all that. And then you can say, I also want to use Power Automate. I just need to track things that involve my company on there. And I want to create a quick and easy data entry form. I can do that with Power Apps. So I've seen that at the very low end. At the high end on there, I've seen companies replace a lot of their manual processes in there. I mentioned when you look at ordering laptops, if that's a manual process. I've seen companies who are tracking receipts from each employee for their expenses on there, and they've created a Power Apps and a Power Automate to quickly and easily replace this manual process they have in there. And when it comes to industries, you see stuff all across the board. Recently, because of COVID, I've seen a lot of people create Power Apps and use Power Automate for health checks. And I know at EY where I work, you can't go to a building unless you do a health check. And so they created these quick and easy Power Apps where you go and you enter information, and then it sends that information using Power Automate to say this person's okay and they're allowed in the building, and it goes and ties in with their badge on that. And that's been a huge thing that quickly and easy people have created. Imagine trying to do that in .NET, all the work that would take to build that all in there, when you can do that in just a few hours. I've seen a lot of people use it in healthcare for tracking patient discharge information. They want to enter all this stuff and automate the process of notifying the appropriate people and getting things ready, having person's medicine ready by sending an email alert on there, by having all the paperwork filled out and sending alerts if it's not, because it's a huge amount of time or a huge amount of money you can lose in a hospital if people are staying longer, even just a few hours on there. So they try to automate all that process in healthcare, which has worked really well. And then I see it like in financial or retail, especially with understanding customers. And I want to go in there and I want to mine all maybe a customer's LinkedIn accounts and Twitter accounts and pull that information and use that as part of the customer 360. And then have some entry form where I can enter some information about that customer, and then have all that display in Power BI in a dashboard. So if I'm on the phone with the customer, I have all the information in front of me. So that works very well for banking when you're looking to have a financial advisor talk with the customer and upsell them. They have all that information in their hands, and it makes that transaction with the customer so much easier. And I've seen this built mostly by people who are not IT people. So that's why this one person shop can do it, because it's made it very easy for them. And you don't have to have an IT staff. And I've found people just with a little bit of training on there can be very productive in Power Apps and Power Automate.
Thank you, James. So who do you see as competing platforms to Power App, as well as, what is their market share? So what is the market share of Power App versus, let's say, APN versus Mendix versus, there are so many, right? Even Salesforce and ServiceNow, quote unquote, low code platforms, right? Because you can pretty much build anything, any custom objects or views or connectors and integrations of any sort without writing a single line of code. You can configure it, right? The profiling and design and all. So who do you see as closest competition to Power App platform, as well as what do you see the market share for Power Apps right now?
I'll probably throw that back on you. I've been immersed in the Microsoft world, and I don't have a lot of knowledge of the competitors outside of that. I can say within the Microsoft world, I would say at any large company, probably 50% of them are using some form of Power Apps, and almost all of them are using Power BI. And almost if you take all those 4 products in there, and probably 90% of customers who are large are using Power Automate. But as far as the competitors, I would ask you.
Yeah, we see Appian as a major player in this particular space, because let's say we get 10 engagement and probably 5 of them are in Appian, and Mendix is another one which is there. So we see 2 to 3 in Power App, 2 to 3 in Mendix, and majority of it is Appian for now. It may change. I think Power App as a platform is still getting a lot of traction, but adoption is still relatively not as much. That's where companies like Sexton may play a role. I think it's because there's an AI component, there's a Dataverse component, there's Power BI component, there's a Power App component, right? There's so much, and Power Automate. Actually, parts of Power Apps is getting a lot more momentum. For example, Power Automate that you talked about earlier, we see a lot of use cases and a lot of requirement emerging on that side of it. Power BI was always there, so it's a mature product, right? It goes without saying. So I think right now we see APN as one of the players that we get a lot more requirement out of, but Power App is catching up for sure. I think there's a lot of horsepower there. It's just people are not aware of it, and there are not many companies who have enough supply of Power App resources. So there are people available for Dynamics, SharePoint, and all. There was a use case that we were building for Microsoft, where we were building some data centers in India, and we were using Dynamics and SharePoint and Office 365 and extending it, building land acquisition, profiling, electrical plumbing drawings. So those are the areas where we saw documentation was done in SharePoint, right? So all the collaboration was done in Office 365. So we started seeing a lot more, but I think it's still work cut out for companies like us who are Microsoft specific to take the conversation to the next level. Adoption, more than adoption, is evangelizing the power of Power App platform is critical, right? Not many, even Microsoft shops who are using Dynamics or SharePoint for years, not have utilized enough, and it's very easy. It's like you have to have business consultant more so to design and develop this one. Probably not required those million lines of code, right? You can do it much easier than that, right? So it's something that we are looking forward to, and Saxon can play a critical role in that journey for our customers as well as beyond.
Yeah. I'll point out one thing too. There's a version of Power Automate for desktop that came out about a year ago, and I'm starting to see people use this, especially for smaller shops, because Power Automate, as I explained before, have a lot of connectors to things that are on the internet, more of web-based connectors to things like Salesforce and such. Power Automate for desktop can automate those tasks that you do on your desktop. Maybe you're moving a lot of documents and folders around, and maybe you're pulling weather data from a website and putting it in Excel. Anything that is a repetitive task, I'm seeing all sorts of businesses go, as long as they find out about this, they go, well, wait a minute, I'm doing the same thing over and over again every day. There's got to be a way to automate this, and Power Automate for desktop is a solution for that. And that will also go in hand in hand a lot of times with Power Apps, where they collect this data through Power Apps and they store it someplace. Then they need to take action on that, and that action may be something that needs to be on your desktop, and that's what Power Automate for desktop. It's a specific version of Power Automate can help out too.
Right. No, absolutely. What is one of the most interesting use case that you have seen recently using Power App or even Power Automate or EI engine, right? That is built in there. So can you talk about a use case that you find most interesting across any industry of your choice?
Yeah, sure. There was a customer who was using Power Automate and Power Apps on their phone. And what they were doing is they were taking pictures of, and they were, well, there's a few of them that were doing something similar, but I'll use this one that was taking pictures of power lines and the connection boxes in there. And they were actually having drones go out and think of if something's wrong with your power lines, and you got to go, okay, where is this connection somewhere that's broken? And so they had, previously you'd have to go and somebody would visually look at all these power lines and try to guess where the connection was. And then they'd have to climb up there and get a closer look. Well, drones came out and added drones taking pictures to the Power Automate, and the drones would go to each of these sections of where the power lines were and take pictures. Those pictures would be stored and would pull in a Power Automate, and then they would use AI to look at that picture and find faults. And through trial and error and building a machine learning model, they can say within that high degree of accuracy, well, something's wrong with your, the picture shows of something that's cracked or broken on there. And that Power Automate would then alert somebody and create a ticket. And then that ticket would be opened up in Power Apps, and they would fill out information in addition to, by looking at the picture and add some clarity to what they see. And then they would they would sign it to a certain technician and give them all the information they needed. They would attach the picture, and then that, using Power Automate, would be sent to that technician on his phone, where he would be alerted to where to go. Then he would go and make the fix, and then he would use the Power Apps to go and say this has been repaired, which would then trigger Power Automate. And in some cases, at least this was planned, they would have it to restore service by going and automatically turning on some more power things, or at least alerting people they can turn them on now, and then allowing and attaching, and then sending that to the homeowners on there. So you can imagine this huge manual process that could take hours and days is now completely automated. And think of the efficiency of this and the time and cost savings on this. So that was one situation where I almost sat back in awe and said, wow, I can't believe they've taken it to this level. And what was really amazing was when they showed me how they built it and how long it took. It was a matter of 2 days. They had the basics working out for this. And over a few weeks, they had this very sophisticated platform, and the people development were not IT people. They were business people who took the challenge to go and create this. And a lot of times the business people, they see the inefficiencies, and if they know about something like Power Apps and Power Automate, they go, wait a minute, I think we can build something. And that they took that initiative and it saved the company who knows how many millions of dollars.
Cool, thanks. I'll also share one telco use case where a large telco who is using Microsoft Dynamics and CRM on the customer support side of it. So as the cases were coming in, they had this routing process. So based on the voice of the customer, if they're angry, they're happy, the product line, the billing question or whatever not, they were routing it. So let's say somebody says, I'm very unhappy, I want to discontinue the service. So it will bypass the normal L1, L2, L3, and it would route it to a supervisor. And before the call shows up on the supervisor's screen, there would be prompt and responses. Prompt is like, when a question comes in from customer or comment comes in, the AI engine behind the scene would give a suggestion how to deal with it, right? So if a customer is being loud, you want to be as low in your pitch and then try to resolve it, right? So they found out that a lot of quality checks they used to do manually, they were able to use it through Power Automate as well as embedding some AI into it, which is basically a recommendation engine behind the scene. And also they were taking all these learning and feeding it back into the transactional system, where that becoming knowledge base. How do you handle it? There's a heat map where who is happy today, who's unhappy, why they're unhappy, what do I need to do? So basically it's a self-learning process, and the map basically dictates how I am dealing with my customers, right? Whether they are business customers or consumers or whatever not, right? Very powerful. The most important part of it is like everything is self-healing, self-learning, and it's basically translating into all levels of support tickets, right? So whether you are L1 or L2, L3, everybody is getting the share of the knowledge that system recommendations are being generated through this process. So very powerful. and useful, because they attributed that they saved $20 million worth of savings where churn can happen, and they saved it through using Power Automate as well as AI embedded into that dynamic system.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That reminded me of another one that I saw that was tremendously impactful. Think of it if you are a salesperson in the store and you have all these customers come in. Well, who do I go to give the attention to? Well, what they had done was and this privacy concern, and you had allowed this to happen, but they collected all this information from each customer. They found the information, a lot of information of when they went to an online store, and they may have bought stuff or put stuff in their cart and never purchased it. All the information interaction was pulled. They also linked into their Twitter feeds and the Facebook accounts. They were able to figure out, based on names and addresses, that they were, yes, in fact, the person's Twitter and Facebook account, pulled it all in. And they would have this dashboard in front of them that were using Power Automate and Power BI, and it used sensors within a store to know who was in there, because the customer allowed their phone to be integrated. And so they can immediately see, oh, this person here has bought all this from us previously. They yesterday were on our online site and had put a handbag in their cart but didn't purchase it. And on Twitter and Facebook, they said, oh, I'm looking to buy this product. I need to go to the store and see it. And as a salesperson, well, there's a very good chance they're going to buy this. So I'm just going to walk up to them and it kind of could be a little freaky. Hey, I know you're interested in this handbag. We're going to go, how do you know? But you can do it in a way that you can give them the service and focus your attention on the people that are most likely to buy something. This was all done in a matter of a few weeks with Power Automate, Power BI, and Power Apps. And the time and money savings for something like this is quite impressive. And that was another one that I sat back and said, wow, what a great idea. And it's just the art of the possible. As you learn these products and you hear these use cases, light bulbs should be going off in your head like, wow, I can automate this, or I can do things I never thought was possible because it was too manual. I can now do them with these products.
Right. Thank you, James. We are getting to the end of the hour. Just want to say thank you to all of our attendees. Setson is Microsoft partners, and we specialize in Power App Platform. We are a high-end technology system integration company. If you need any help in adoption or learning about Power App Platform, please treat us as a safe harbor. We look forward to having a conversation with you, and no cost to you. This is just basically evangelizing the power of Power App Platform, as well as how do you use it in your respective environment. So thank you again. Appreciate the time. Look forward to speaking with you. Take care.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Thank you, James.